where have you heard this before? We're still having problems in council chambers. The audio system in the room is not working. Fortunately, we're just going through my computer and I'm the only one here, besides staff, of course. So hopefully it's going to work okay. Having said that, I'll call the General Purposes Committee meeting to order. May I have a motion on the minutes of the GP committee? Moved and seconded. Any errors or omissions? Okay, then I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. It brings us to our one item of substance on the GP meeting, the Industrial Lands Intensification Initiative. The two speakers I'm told who are going to address this are Katie Ferland and John Hopkins. So we'll go to them.
Your Worship?
Yes?
Councillor McPhail, I need to declare a conflict of interest.
Okay. Okay.
My husband has an interest in a business that owns industrial land in Richmond.
Okay. All right. So we will excuse you. Yeah, if you can leave your video off, you can listen to the what's going on, but not be part of it. Okay, so John Hopkins, Katie Ferland. No, Katie, you're muted. Katie, you're still muted. Do we have any ideas about this? Katie, we can't hear you.
Sorry.
I heard sorry. Is that
you
Katie?
did hear that. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Oh, beautiful. Okay. Your Worship, we have nothing to add to the report. If you wish, we would be happy to provide a brief summary to begin.
Well, I tell you what, why don't you just, why don't you focus on what's on GP 18 and 18, which is page 3 and 4 of the report, which really summarize the bottom line of the whole thing. Why don't you give us any introduction you want, but maybe you could focus on that.
Absolutely. Your Worship and members of Council, the initiative was undertaken to identify and assess changes to land use regulations and policies that could help encourage higher utilization of limited industrial lands. This is in light of multiple recent studies that have shown the region.
What'd you do?
Pardon me? Uh-oh. Is that better?
Yep.
My apologies. So the recommendations that we're proposing are in light of the fact that the region faces an acute shortage of vacant industrial land. This presents a risk to the regional economy since industrial land is required to accommodate a broad range of businesses that are both population serving and trade related, as well as those involved in supply chain activities for most other sectors. So the recommendations in this report were developed in consultation with key stakeholders and are aligned with multiple city strategies, including the OCP and the Resilient Economy Strategy, as well as the recently adopted Metro Vancouver Regional Industrial Land Strategy. I will pass it over to Mr. Hopkins from Policy Planning to briefly summarize the recommendations on page GP 18 and 19.
Thank you, Katie. Good afternoon, Your Worship and members of Council. I hope everybody can hear me. The Policy Planning have worked closely with economic development on this important initiative, and we've recommended a series of amendments to both the zoning bylaw and the OCP to facilitate intensive industrial development now and into the future. So as Your Worship had mentioned, a summary of the amendments can be found on page GP 18 and GP 19 in your report. Amendments to the zoning bylaw do include some tweaking to permitted uses, some limited parking reductions, and modest amendments to building massing, such as height and site coverage. These amendments will help to facilitate more intensive industrial development. We've also made some recommendations to amend the official community plan to help future-proof for larger multi-story industrial development. This would allow consideration of increasing the maximum density through a rezoning process subject to some locational and site criteria. As market conditions change and older and underbuilt sites are redeveloped over time, these amendments could provide an opportunity to accommodate increased economic and employment activity on existing industrial sites. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, let's go to questions. We have a question from Councillor McNulty. Bill?
A number of questions, if I can. First of all, we're receiving this for information. Am I not on GP1? We're going to receive it for information.
No,
And
it's
then-
more than
Then
that.
we have a bylaw. And
Well,
what
you're
does the
changing the
bylaw do to
OCP.
change the present circumstances of that area. What specific changes other than what you've got in 17 and 18 and 19?
Sure. Through your worship to Councillor McNulty, we do have a series of bylaw amendments, both in the zoning bylaw and the official community plan. The zoning bylaw amendments, and perhaps I'll reference GP 18 and GP 19, which is a summary table of the bylaw
Yeah,
amendments.
I've got that.
Okay, so they're for consideration this afternoon and for first reading of next Monday's council meeting.
Okay.
They include a range of housekeeping to some modest amendments with respect to introducing some new permitted industrial uses. We also have amendments to some parking reductions for certain industrial uses, not all industrial uses, but for some. We're looking at increasing the building height for industrial buildings from 12 meters to 16 meters for industrial buildings that are more than 50 meters away from a residential area. We're also looking at increasing the site coverage for industrial buildings as well. With respect to the official community plan, we have a key policy that would consider an increase in density of 1 FAR up to a 1.5 FAR, subject to a rezoning process and also locational and site criteria. For example, a minimum site area of 2.5 hectares would be required. It would have to be within a kilometer away from a provincial highway network and could not be adjacent to a residential area. Through that, we have also introduced some development permit guidelines that would address any massing or building issues with respect to ramping that would be required to get to a second floor of an industrial building. So a development permit would be required for a multi-story industrial building if these bylaws were adopted.
Okay, if I can follow up, Your Worship, I have a number of matters I'd like to get clarification on, if I may. Having walked that area many times, there is a very large residential and a separate commercial component in that area. What would prevent somebody from coming along and building rental housing in that area, in the residential area that exists now? Or does this put a freeze on everything that exists there or could exist there?
If I may, Your Worship, it's Barry Conkin, Director of Policy Planning. Through Councillor McNulty, what area are you referring to, sir? I've kind of lost. I'm not sure what area you're referring to.
Right, Leslie Road, for example. If you go on Leslie Road, there are some older homes there, and I'm sure they'll be knocked down and could be redeveloped in a single family. If you go along Leslie Road to the end to Garden City, there's a tremendous number of homes in there. As a matter of fact, there's some very, very nice homes in there. When you look on Brown Road, similar. So I'm just wondering why this was not brought out. If you look at the corner of Alderbridge and Hazelbridge, you've got a number of restaurants. Okay, so that all the way through, and we just rezoned at the top of Canby Road and Hazelbridge. So I'm trying to look at what exists there now, and to say, and it's that the fact that could we not have spot zoning if somebody came along with something creative in there within an industrial area? It's not really very industrial, to be quite frank with you.
If I may, through your worship to Councillor McNulty, I think the areas that you're talking about is considered an industrial reserve in our city center area plan. So there is some site-specific industrial zones in that area, but it's subject. Any rezoning in those areas will be subject to the city center area plan, And we have a number of policies in there with respect to the type of uses, the height, site coverage that the city center area plan basically would adhere to. So this study really deals with a lot of industrial land outside the city center. Within the city center, we're not looking at making any significant changes at all. So development would continue.
I guess what I'm trying to get is, can we have an open mind to what could exist there and what could be created within there? Because I understand there is some thoughts of some activity in there with people that own, in particular, residential. Why did we limit ourselves only to including microbreweries and manufacturing? Did we not have anything else in the industrial area that we might? Any clean industry? What about computers? What about office space? What about,
Through
those
your
kinds
worship,
of things?
through your worship to Councillor McNulty, the city center area plan and the industrial reserves within that area do permit a wide range of industrial uses, including those that you have mentioned.
Okay. I just don't want to see us get ourselves locked in because I think that area is going to be transitional in the next 20 years and there's going to be a lot of movement. We know there's a lot going to be happening at Lansdowne itself and things are moving north. And I think it's important that we not back ourselves into a hole and that we allow for further creativity, because that area actually, in a way, except for Aberdeen, which we allow housing anyhow and apartments, needs some stimulation. And I think a combination of clean industrial, commercial, and allow the residential continue could make for a very, very good neighborhood that could work synergistic together and on it. So for the most part, I don't mind the report, but as I said, I don't want to see us locked in. I want to see us have that land for attraction, to have some further development that maybe just get off number 3 road and have some further development elsewhere. So I'll be supporting this, and but from what I've heard, I can't support it, and obviously we can see what happens in terms of those that might like to bring some proposal forward that we would consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Steves.
Thanks. My question is related to GP 31 sustainability, and it mentions the STEP code, but we have tried to get things like greenhouses on rooftops and solar panels on rooftops, and none of that's mentioned. So I'm wondering where staff is on that one.
Through your worship to Councillor Steves, the Sustainability Department is working through a number of council referrals, and there is a report forthcoming examining a range of sustainability measures that could be implemented to that would apply to industrial buildings to help reduce energy and emissions. So that report is forthcoming in the early part of 2021.
Okay, the reason I'm asking the question is because it seems to me if we're giving a fair amount of benefits in the allowing extra density in that in the industrial areas, that we could make solar or heat pumps or geothermal or things like that, or farm greenhouses on rooftops, a negotiated part of it, or we can make it mandatory. But in California, by the way, they're making it mandatory within the next 3 years. They recently moved in California. They had 4 million acres of California burned up last summer, and they're making all new buildings have no natural gas, and they must have solar and possibly heat pumps. And I think we should be looking at that too. Okay, thanks very much. I'll look forward to the future report.
Okay, anyone else? Maybe I could ask staff the question that Councillor McNulty raised first off about the Aberdeen area. Maybe we could have a memo from you just distinguishing, where's the city center and a bit of explanation versus that Aberdeen area. I think that would be.
Through your worship, we'll be happy to provide that to you as soon as possible.
All right. So, Councillor Day.
much, Mayor Brody. I was curious about on page GP 28, it states that large-scale changes to permit floor area in industrial areas were a concern to the stakeholders because they were worried about across-the-board increases that would raise property values and subsequently property taxes. I would love to see the industrial area really densified. Who are the stakeholders and how many did you speak to?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, there was significant engagement that occurred throughout this initiative since 2018, including 2 stakeholder workshops, one-on-one interviews, ongoing discussions with NAIOP and UDI, as well as Metro Vancouver staff. And yes, the concern was any across-the-board increases, significant increases to density could have unintended negative consequences and open the doors to speculation, perhaps increasing the price further, potentially even increasing DCC costs and having those kinds of unintended consequences. Further, what we found through this study was that the majority of industrial sites throughout the city are currently not built to current density provisions as it is.
Okay,
if I may add to that, Your Worship, to Councillor Day, just to clarify Ms. Furlan's point, most of our industrial areas are between 0.3 and 0.6 approximately. So if we were to achieve closer to 1.0, that would be in some cases a tripling of usable density on those properties. So we would in fact see intensification within the existing 1.0 FAR that's already allowed. So we tried to find that balance point between the stakeholders' concerns and the reality out there, which is these lands are generally rather underbuilt as it is. So we're hoping to get close to the maximum, but we don't need to go beyond, we don't think, at this point.
Just a follow-up question, because I read the report that was from Metro Vancouver, the intensification of industrial land, the one from 2014, and they have a really good guideline of how we can change building design and to make better use of the limited industrial land that we have. So while we're not currently, we don't have an appetite for developers, builders, or landowners to densify the industrial land. If they came to us with a really creative idea, like something like 2 or 3 stories and having production on the top level and, you know, whatever on like storage on the second level and then actual trucks going in and out of the third level, we currently don't have any bylaws that would allow for that, right? So if they came forward with something really creative, can we make zoning changes or amendments to allow for something that's kind of groundbreaking?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, that's exactly what the OCP policy that we're proposing will do, is to lay the groundwork to allow someone to be creative and think outside the box. And if it makes sense and we can support it, then a site-specific custom zone would be utilized, keeping within the OCP designation as well as our Metro Vancouver designations, et cetera, to make sure it stays as a workplace. But yes, we could find creativity for future clients and developers as required.
I look forward to that because I would hate to see any more pressure on farmland. So thank you so much.
Okay, Councillor Wolf.
Great, thank you very much. I hope the power stays on today. It's pretty windy out there. I have a number of questions and comments, and I guess I'll just do them all right now as time permits. So my first question to staff, so it's been brought up by a few different councillors so far. I feel there's a conflict on page 19 and page 28, and I need to have that part. I think we all need to have that figured out. So on page 19, in the portion of the table, the second row from the bottom, where it starts OCP. So this is referring to the outside of city center. Here, the recommendation in the report reads that it would allow increase from 1.0 to 1.5. So that's the second row from the bottom, the middle column. It's saying, I'm reading the report is recommending a change to allow a higher FAR. But then on page 28, like staff just replied, on page 28, the short 1-sentence paragraph in the middle there says, as a result, there's no proposed changes at this time to the maximum 1.0 FAR. So what, can I get that clarified, please?
Yeah, if I may, through your worship to Councillor Wolf, what we're saying in that is the policy that we're putting in the OCP for those examples, as mentioned by Councillor Day, for example, someone who wants to be creative and think outside the box, we're welcoming an application to a maximum of 1.5. If you're going to go through a rezoning process and secure the type of design and building that we're looking for and the uses that meet council's direction on industrial areas. So the bylaw as it is in terms of zoning stays at 1.0. But if someone wanted to come in and do more, we would encourage that, but up to a maximum of 1.5.
Thank you very much, and through your worship to staff on that. Then would that request for addition, FAR, would that go to would that come to council, or would that be a direct building approval through staff?
No, through your worship to council, it is a rezoning. It needs a site-specific zoning bylaw amendment, so it would appear before council.
Okay, terrific. Thank you for clarifying that, because there's a few other comments in here that mentioned going through council or being short-tracked for efficiency and speed of getting buildings up, going straight to staff. So I wanted to clarify the difference in that point. Thank you. I also appreciated Councillor Steve's question. I had a number of questions about sustainability as well. And I was wondering if there is staff online who can comment on the progress of some of the sustainability initiatives on industrial land. And then my additional question to that is Mitchell Island Environmental Stewardship Initiative, is that unique, or is there a similar one to Fraser Land's Environmental Stewardship Initiative? And all the other areas, do they have, there was that one page in the report that shows all the different study areas. Like, does each of those have its own environmental stewardship initiative program, where there's educational events and publications that go out to the business owners? So those two questions, if sustainability staff are here.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, excuse me, maybe I'll start with the second question. Currently, the Mitchell Island Initiative is a unique project. We have in the past done executed information for industrial areas for how to not have materials go down the drain, these kind of initiatives. But based on the success of Mitchell Island over time, there is opportunity for staff to look at this more broadly in other areas. And I'll ask Norm Connolly, the sustainability manager, to provide an update on the different referrals and sustainability updates that are outlined in the report.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, there's a few initiatives underway right now with respect to industrial buildings, all buildings basically, but with respect to industrial buildings, we've got, we're looking to extend the energy step code as a building code requirement for industrial buildings, hopefully in the next couple of years. Right now, they're not covered by the energy step code, so we have no way of setting energy performance targets on those buildings. There's now openness to do that at the Step Code Council level and at Building Safety Standards branch of the province. So we hope to bring something forward on that in the next year and a half or so. And in terms of that, there's also movement on the provincial and STEPCO Council level to include now emission targets in tandem with energy performance targets. So we would have a way of starting to define or set limits on carbon emissions in these buildings, which is something we can't do right now. So that's going to be tied in tandem with that. We're also looking at developing zero emission vehicle EV charging requirements, basically for workplace charging, as well as visitor stalls. And we have a research report that's just been completed on behalf of several local governments, including Richmond, funded by BC Hydro, that proposes some targets for that. So in the first half of 2021, we hope to bring some proposed amendments to a zoning bylaw forward for council consideration on that. And in terms of overall, to Councillor Steve's question, we're working on a background report, a policy report called Policy Approach for Distributed Solar Energy Systems in Richmond. And this responds to council referrals on that. We hope to bring that report forward in the first half of this year in tandem with timing on our new community energy emissions plan.
Great, thank you, through your worship to staff. I appreciate the addition to what's in the report on both of those or all three of those comments there. And I would be interested if we could take a leadership role where we set targets, which can be amended later. So if Richmond sets targets for step code and EV infrastructure, perhaps if there's a Metro Vancouver wide or BC or Canada wide decision later on, we could amend it to follow suit with that. But to not have any targets in this and to allow the intensification in some of the steps that I'll mention in a moment. Yeah, I'm not quite satisfied to go ahead with the message this would send, that buildings can increase square footage and not plan to include this infrastructure, and to have to include it later would then take even more space up from the non-utilized concrete structures and such. So that's one interest. Another question I had to staff, perhaps the two who were going to speak at the beginning on this one, tax rates. Is there anything in this intensification initiative that would look into two businesses side by side, one manufacturing and selling local products? Just one that I saw the other day was boat trailers for small craft boats, and then a business next door that takes a lineup of trucks that are junk removal trucks in the middle of a Saturday, a line down the road, taking nonstop garbage. Is there a different tax rate for the two businesses if their square footage is the same on the same street, just theoretically?
Okay, Your Worship, maybe I can answer that one. Property taxes are based on assessment values. So BC Assessment has to determine a assessment class and assessment value for the different properties. From your description, it sounds like both types of properties would fall under class 06, so they would have the exact same tax rate.
Terrific. Thank you very much. That helps.
How many more questions have you got, Michael?
I don't. I'm not going to make all my comments now, but I just have a couple more questions.
Okay, Michael, we're running a little long right now.
Oh, okay. I'll shorten it down here then. The last point on this is on the agenda package, the second page. The last point, point 6 of this item says staff review and report back in 2 years. So I wasn't on council at the time of the work plan for this to come ahead. So I'm curious, 2 years, is there a reason for that, or could it be 1 year? Because as far as I'm concerned, most of the things we've heard in the last 2 years, it's been a 1 year review. Could that be addressed, or could that just be amended to 1 year?
Through your worship, to Councillor, to monitor the implementation of these recommendations, should they be approved by council, we will be looking at data from building permit and business license records associated with industrially zoned properties. We feel that 2 years is an appropriate time frame to be able to collect enough data to make some inferences as to the impact that these changes will have made. As we monitor, however, if we feel there's sufficient data to provide some meaningful insights before that time, we could certainly provide an interim report to council.
Okay, great, thank you. I'll just jump to my other question that's also a financial one. So I look back in the 2017 work plan for this initiative, and in there I read that it was to be finished mid-2019 with a budget of $100,000. So we're later in time. Did we go up in money too, and cost for this?
Through your worship, to Councillor Wolf, yes, $100,000 was approved as part of the 2018 budget process. About $68,000 was spent of that, so approximately $32,000 remains to support the implementation of this work if needed. If not, those funds would be returned to the city's rate stabilization account.
Okay, great. That's thanks to all staff, through your worship, on that. I'll just say now so they don't take more time up later. I won't be supporting it at this point for a number of reasons. I'll get into those reasons, I guess, at council. Thank you.
Councillor Howe.
Worship, thanks to staff for this very good report, very comprehensive, and I'm going to support the report and its direction. However, I have a few questions. Now, I have the feeling that the focus of the report is on how to make better use and more efficient use of the existing supply of industrial land. And as far as I can see, there's no mentioning about how we can increase the actual supply of industrial land in terms of footage. So could this be the next step that we also try to see beyond what we have right now, to find or develop strategies to increase the actual increase of supply of industrial land?
If I may, through your worship, to Councillor Howe, we did look at some of those issues when we were preparing the report and doing the project. Finding new industrial land is actually very challenging. The question is, where do you take it from? And as supported by City Council over the last decades, we don't want to touch our agricultural areas. They are to be saved for farming and for food production. Bringing more industrial, for example, closer into city centers or into other areas where there's existing residential uses, we're walking into potential conflicts. And so the region is struggling with the issue in all jurisdictions is, can you create more? It's very challenging to do so. We think that based on the project that we've completed here, that intensification of our existing lands is probably the better option. It is just a very difficult thing to come up with new industrial areas based on a lot of other considerations, traffic, transportation, environmental, conflict with residential, etc. So we think this is our best approach.
Yes, I agree that this might be our best approach for the time being, but I think we should also keep our eyes open, our mind open, to see if there can be other ways to increase the actual supply. And along the same line, my feeling is that, we talk about how we can make it more flexible for different types of industrial use and commercial use going together. But I'm also thinking about whether or not we should also strategize in the direction that we should make room for some kind of specific industries, such as filming. That the film industry is booming, and the kind of land that they need might be different from what we are talking about here. And the other example could be high-tech industry. And I remember that when we were trying to bid for the second headquarters of Amazon, we ran into the problem of not having the appropriate kind of land for certain industries. So again, could that be another step that we, instead of just talking about what we have right now and how we can make better use, can we also look into the direction of what kind of industry we want to attract into the city and to make room for them, so to speak?
If I may, Ms. Ferland, perhaps you could answer that question with economic development's focus.
Through your worship, yes, to Councillor Au. The primary goal of this work was to find ways to be able to accommodate the retention and growth of Richmond's established and core sectors, so logistics, good movement, distribution. But of course, we have been made aware that there's some interesting opportunities in emerging sector as well, like film production and biotechnology. Yeah. The challenge certainly is that the vacancy rate across all users is just so low, and it is very difficult to accommodate. That said, we certainly are looking, learning more about these emerging sectors and those opportunities so that we can understand what the specific space needs of those sectors might be, and discuss that with developers and find ways where we might be able to develop that product in Richmond's industrial areas.
Yeah, this is exactly, I think, that we have to do. I think we have to protect some form of land for this kind of emerging industries. If we just strategize all the industrial land or make all the industrial land into industrial parks, that may not fit the kind of industry we may want to have in Richmond. Now, my third question is about parking. I know that staff make the recommendation that we might be, perhaps, we need so much parking for industrial land. However, my experience that, if we go to industrial parks right now, whether it's north or south, parking is always a problem, because of those industrial parks, they may have a very small, a large number of small plants, and parking is a problem. Some of the industrial parks, they do not even have enough visitors parking, and we cannot park on the street. So I question the wisdom of reducing parking requirements in industrial land.
Through your worship to Councillor Au, we are recommending some parking reductions, but not right across the board. The parking reductions that we're recommending here are based on some empirical evidence from recent developments with respect to some of these new uses that we're proposing, which includes industrial manufacturing, industrial warehouse. We do have evidence that they do not create a demand for as much parking as other industrial uses. At the same time, we're also keeping our heavy industrial parking requirements the same, as we need to do further parking studies. And having said all that, we do have our transportation staff here today as well that could speak to that. And I'll hand it over to transportation. Anything to add to that, Lloyd?
Through your worship to Councillor Au, not too much. I think that pretty much covers it. Really, the big change here is we're proposing to create a few new different classifications of industrial use that use a little bit less parking, in our opinion, based on studies that have been done on those types of uses over the last few years.
Okay, good. So, I'm going to support the report and the recommendations. But as mentioned earlier, I hope that we don't stop here. We go further into having some other strategies to increase land supply and also to protect certain types of land for certain types of industries.
Okay, Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to staff, just a couple of questions here on this. And so just to confirm, by keeping the city center area to a lower FAR or lower heights and then lower FAR, keeping it lower, is that effectively preventing an overburdening of the tax onto those specific areas? Because if you did raise the FAR to say the 1.5 or the 2 or whatever, then that raises the underlying value, and then it pushes the comparative value over to that piece of land. Is that correct? And then they end up with a bigger share of the tax burden, and that's why we're keeping the FARs and the heights different.
Through your worship to Councillor Liu, I'll let Mr. Hopkins add to that if needed, but my understanding was that the reason why the changes that we're recommending don't apply to the city center is because the city center industrial reserves already allow greater density and greater flexibility in the uses, but I will pass that over to Mr. Hopkins to clarify.
Yeah, thanks through your worship to Councillor Liu. We're not recommending any changes to the city center area plan. There's already quite a bit of flexibility. There's increased densities for different areas of the city center. So there was a feeling that there was no need to really change the city center area plan. So most of the amendments are outside of the city center. And one thing I just want to emphasize is that we're not actually recommending any increase to industrial densities outside the city center. We have a policy framework that would consider it subject to a rezoning process. So I just want to emphasize that as well.
Okay, so we're by not actually putting it in at the outset, it actually keeps their land value down, because
that's correct.
We don't want their land value to go up exponentially and then create high taxes, because that'll encourage them to actually leave Richmond. And so what our goal is to keep them in Richmond, keep them producing goods and services here in Richmond, and stay here. Yeah. Okay. Now, just a quick question. Is agricultural uses and aquaculture uses, so like indoor farming, is that permitted in these zones?
Through your worship to Councillor Liu, agriculture is a permitted use in all zones in Richmond, which includes all industrial zones.
And does that include aquaculture, like fishing, fish in there as well?
I would have to defer to John.
Yeah, through your worship, Councillor, yes, it would. And actually, in some ways, it would be more suitable industrial sites because you'd require a full building to have aquaculture. So yes, it would be permitted.
Okay, thank you. And my final question, why don't we want the ramps on to the outside of the buildings where people see it? Are they particularly ugly?
Through your worship, Councillor Liu, yes, there's only a few examples that I could point to. Actually, there's one that's being proposed in Burnaby, which will be the first sort of multi-story industrial development in Canada. The ones we've seen is you do tend to see these really large ramps that can only go at a certain incline because you're dealing with 18-wheelers. So they can be quite unsightly, but I think through mitigating measures such as landscaping, maybe setbacks and whatnot, you can soften those ramps to adjacent properties.
But our cool mural program could just dovetail with that so nicely.
Yeah, well, it's a good mitigation plan. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Councillor Day.
I have one more question on GP 33. Staff talk about the stratifying of industrial units, and that we need to encourage the preservation of large industrial parcels. Recently, we saw an application for stratifying of an industrial park. Should we consider banning that so that we can preserve the larger parcels?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, what we learned through our research and our industry engagement was that stratified industrial actually serves quite an important role in the regional economy, and it is part of a balanced, healthy market. And in many cases, in fact, the majority of owners of strata industrial parcels are small businesses that wish to own and occupy their own space. So what we heard is that it's important to ensure that we can maintain a balance of both types of products. And in Richmond, we are seeing that in the last 5-year period. Just under half of all new industrial building floor space was stratified. At the same time, we're still seeing that large floor plate leasable product being developed. For example, the Eco Waste project in East Richmond is anticipated to bring about 2.8 million square feet of leasable space onto the market. So at this time, what we're hearing is that it's important to maintain both types for the regional economy, and it's something that we'll continue to monitor.
If I may, Your Worship, just to follow up to Councillor Day, yes, as Ms. Ferland just concluded, we will monitor this part very closely over the coming year to two. If there is an emerging trend that does cause any concern, we will be reporting back to Council with information and seeking direction from Council.
Can I just follow up on that? So, so that seems like if we're reacting to the market instead of leading the market. I mean, wouldn't we be better off to just say that large parcels over X amount of square feet cannot be stratified so that we don't have to, I mean, someone could buy in thinking maybe one day they're going to be able to, or they can keep things exactly as they are. And I'm worried that if we don't limit it, that we limit our redevelopment down the road like 10, 20 years from now. So is it forward enough thinking to not limit the stratification of the larger parcels? That's what I'm worried about, is that if we're reacting to the market instead of leading the market.
For your worship to Councillor Day, yes, those large parcels are also very important. The Metro Vancouver Regional Industrial Strategy was adopted this past summer, and they identified that as an opportunity. What they said is that large trade-oriented parcels that are near key transportation infrastructure are also really important in it, and there could be ways that those sites could be preserved. They identified the first step in exploring those policies is to actually define trade-oriented parcels and work with member municipalities and stakeholders to identify where those parcels are. So that will be an important first piece of work that happens at a regional level before any specific policies can be explored to protect those parcels.
Thank you.
All right, may I have a motion?
Move.
Okay, moved and seconded. Further discussion on this? Councillor Day, oh, your hand's still up, was still up. Anybody else? All right, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? It's carried with Councillor Wolf opposed. And we'll ask for a motion to adjourn. So, someone move it? Seconded? Okay, we're now adjourned. We now have the Finance Committee meeting to be held. So I will call the Finance Committee meeting to order. May I have a motion on the minutes? Okay, moved and seconded. Any errors or omissions? All those in favor, opposed, carried. Active capital projects. Mike Ching and Jenny Ho.
Nothing to add, Your Worship.
All right. We have a motion. Okay, moved and seconded. Any questions on that, Councillor Liu? We can't hear you, Alexa.
On FIN 23, I know we had approved the number 2 road bike lane that goes from Steveston to Williams. Is that on the following years? Is that for 2022? Is that correct?
Sorry, FIN 22, the...
FIN 23, it sort of lists out all the different like bike and transportation infrastructure projects, street work. And I noticed that the number 2 road bike lane wasn't there. And I think, and now is it this year that we're just designing it and next year, 2022, we're building it? So
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. And then my next question, so when I look at FIN 10, we've got a list of different categories and things. And I'm wondering if we should have, do we have a specific budget that talks about and deals with the sidewalks and the driveways that are damaged by city trees? Because I know as we work really hard to protect all our trees right now, you know, we're slowly ending up with more and more damage to property and to our sidewalks and everything else. And so is there anywhere that we can see the number, it's separated out anywhere?
We can certainly...
Yep. Sorry, that's Milton Chan here. Through your worship to Councillor Liu. Right now, there's no specific provision for private property damage from trees. There is a capital program in place for fixing city sidewalks and streetlight infrastructure. So in the past couple of years, Council has approved approximately $1.5 million for that program. For driveways, if there is damage to driveways as we are there fixing sidewalks, those are addressed at that point in time.
Okay. Just because as our trees are getting bigger and burlier and we're seeing more and more of them and fewer opportunities for people to switch out, you know, a really big tree for a smaller tree that's doing less damage, do we have any sort of way of tracking or seeing it separately a little bit, how that's going, or to even make a provision? Because I think in the next 10 years, we're going to see more and more sidewalk damage. Certainly we look along Williams between Shell and 4 Road, we can see it's like there's a lot of damage from the tree roots, and those are on our city sidewalks. So I'm just wondering if it makes sense to start looking at it, pulling it out separately, looking at it differently, keeping track of it, just so that we can, you know, keep it in our peripheral vision.
We can definitely look at tracking the actual costs a little bit differently. Right now, this program's been in place since 2018, and staff anticipate that each year going forward, we'll be bringing capital submissions for sidewalk repairs as well.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Councillor Howe. You're muted, Jack.
I have a question on FIN 14, Table 6. And now, when I look at line number 6, sanitary pump station enforcement assessment upgrade and grease management, I noticed that quite a large portion of the budget was not spent. About 40% of the budget was not spent. Now, I'm not saying that this is a bad thing, but I just want to know why. You know, have we over budget, or, you know, because we manage it well so that we save a lot of money? So what was the reason that we have such a high unspent amount?
Through your worship to Councillor Au, most of these capital projects are multi-year. So, but it is stated that it was started in 2018. However, when the work starts and the planning that needs to be done, it takes a few years before it's even, close to completion. So that's the reason why you're only showing almost 50% spent. As we move along with 2021, most of these budgets will be spent or even well into 2022 as well.
I see. Good. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to staff, well, thank you for the report. Seems that projects are moving along, and I know several months ago we had hoped that COVID-19 would not impact our capital projects. I'm just wondering, now over time, have there been any delays that we can attribute to COVID-19?
Through your worship to Councillor McPhail, no, there hasn't been any delays. All projects are, my understanding, all projects are a go.
Well, that's great. That's really good to hear. And considering the weather that we've been having, the extreme rain, it just shows you how important these drainage and laneway upgrades, sanitary pump station, and dike projects really are. Now, just a couple of comments. I walk through London Steveston Park quite often, and just kudos to the design team that even though it's not quite complete, it's being very heavily used, and you can tell that the neighborhood children are really enjoying it. And also, well, many of us were at the opening of the Works-Yard Recycling Depot, and over the holidays, I happened to be there. And it is just so busy, but I tell you, the new format, the new layout is exceptional. So thank you to the design team on that one.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? It brings us to financial information for the third quarter. Want to make a motion on that? Moved and seconded. Discussion, questions? Those in favor? Just Councillor Day. Yes. You're muted, Carol.
We'll get this eventually. On FIN 45 in third quarter, we talk about the real estate. The sales have increased between 36 and 45% because of the categories. Now, is this panic buying because of the foreign buyer registry that was implemented on November 30th?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, the real estate market is impacted by several things. In 2019, there was actually a bit of a delay of several purchases, which is basically picked back up in 2020. So it's more of the delay that happened in 2019.
Okay, well, I just want to bring council's attention to the Globe and Mail report. It's called Foreign Ownership Registry, a Game Changer in BC. And it says that basically there was people buying in a rush before that deadline, because now you can't purchase property for an investor unless you are registered, and you can't have a numbered company anymore. And the idea is that this is supposed to cut back on money laundering and really big time on tax evasion. So given that information, and I hope that staff will be following the chart that I see on FIN 45, which shows the recent residential real estate sales, it really spikes in the third quarter of 2019 or 2020. So I think it's something to watch. I think we really have to pay attention to this, because if this new registration of foreign owners is going to affect our real estate market, I think we need to be very aware of the benefits potentially to the city for that, potentially making housing more affordable for homeowners instead of just investors.
Councillor Rao.
Page FIN 52, staff provided a table on top of the page talking about the decrease in revenue, and then in the middle of the page talks about also we have decrease in expenditure. So I just want to ask the question whether or not the decrease in revenue can be offset by the decrease in expenses. So how are we doing financially, so to speak?
Through your worship to Councillor Au, the mitigations that were put in place actually offset the anticipated reductions in revenue so that the general surplus that is anticipated for this year is essentially 55,000. So essentially they offset each other with some of the mitigation efforts that council has endorsed and senior management has implemented.
Okay, good. Thank you.
All right, let's call the question then on the motion on the matter. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? That is carried. Next is Lulu Island Energy Company. Let's have a motion to receive that for information. Moved and seconded. Okay, Jerry, is there anything to add to that report?
Nothing to add, Your Worship.
Okay, any questions? Councillor Day. You're muted.
Sorry about that. In the report, it talks about that the revenue is actually up 20% over 2019, but the revenue collected is only at 41%, and that staff noted that the delay could be due to COVID. Is it our full intention to collect all of that money that hasn't come in yet from the Energy Corporation?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Day, through discussions with staff, there have been subsequent payments made by some of the stratas, and there's ongoing discussions with them concerning the collection.
So it's your anticipation that all the funds will be collected?
That is correct. If any amounts aren't collected, they be added to the taxes, so they be collected.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, anyone else? All right, we'll call the question then. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? That is carried. Third quarter Richmond Olympic Oval. We'll ask for Rick to make any comments, but someone want to move it? Moved and seconded. Rick Desange, anything to add to?
Nothing further to add, Your Worship.
Okay. Any questions? Councillor Day.
One of the advantages of the Oval being as large as it is there's an expansive space, so you can resume classes and everyone's socially distanced far apart. I wonder if there isn't a way to expand that to the Richmond Curling Club. I just recently found out that they will not be opening at all this year for the curling season is canceled. And that's also a large expansive space. Is there a way to work with the curling club to make use of that space and potentially expand the programs, classes, or whatever over to the Winter Club?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Day, we're happy to speak to any association about further collaboration. At this time right now, to your point, we have taken full advantage of the Oval's expansive spaces for delivering these programs, and they've worked quite successful thus far. But again, if there are other entities that would like to speak to us about that, we're happy to do so.
Can we just make that a request? I'm not just for me, but if would council agree that we could encourage the Oval staff to work with the Winter Club staff to make use of that space that is going to be sitting idle now for undetermined amount of time?
Well, they can staff. Jerry and his staff can speak to city staff and.
Yeah, Mayor Brody, perhaps I could just add that we have been in frequent conversations with the Curling Club and are looking at all of our programming across the city and including youth sport programs, et cetera, which might be appropriate for that space. So that work is underway.
Good.
Steve.
A question I've got, sort of related to this report. And that's future use of the fitness center sites, both at the Oval and elsewhere in Richmond. I've just read a report just today that they're looking across probably all of North America for a reduced use of fitness centers by about 50% because of COVID-19, that people are learning to do more activities outside because they've been stuck at home for 6 or 8 months. They bought their own fitness equipment, and they're not going to go back to the fitness centers after this is over. And they're expecting a number of the private fitness centers will close. So I'm just wondering how this is going to affect us at the Oval, as well as other facilities in Richmond.
Through your worship to Councillor Steeves, this is obviously something we are going to monitor to see what the impact of the pandemic is on the fitness industry. One of the things, of course, yes, there is a growing trend for more online programming and people working out at home. However, that doesn't replace the element of working out or recreating in a more of a social environment, which is also integral and important to that health experience as well. But we're going to continue to assess what that availability is from the community and react to that.
Thank you.
Okay, let's call the question. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? That is carried. And I think that's it. So someone want to move adjournment?